Bring in my panel now. Steve Clemons, MSNBC contributor and Washington editor-at-large for The Atlantic. Niall Stanage, White House columnist at The Hill. And Hugh Hewitt, MSNBC political analyst and host of The Hugh Hewitt Show on Salem Radio Network. Thanks all for being here. Steve, I want to start with you and just set the scene here and the stakes. You have North Korean officials essentially warning that we could see a nuclear war break out on the Korean peninsula. What do you make of what you've seen from North Korea in the past several days? How serious is the threat right now and the saber rattling?
Flamboyant bluster from the North Korean leader is nothing new. That's part of the dance that we've gone through as North Korea has tried to extort for its survival from other nations. It kind of trades trying to behave slightly better than the norm in order to get food, energy, and other resources into the country. So that's not there. But clearly, Kim Jong-un is trying to show that he's not going to blink in this conflict. And, of course, Donald Trump is not prone to blinking. I think the big piece of this that I find bizarre is the notion that China, which has completely dissimilar strategic objectives than the United States in this, that we're pretending that China is somehow going to become a flak for the United States in moving North Korea into the corner we want. China does not want a war in the Korean Peninsula, but China is not going to cripple a country to the degree that we might like. And I think the other piece of this that's really missing is there's no place for North Korea to back into other than total capitulation and just deciding to give up its nuclear program. There's no six-party talks. There's no Iran-like deal for North Korea that China. And so maybe China and Japan will come together at the last moment and put something like that on the table. But, of course, Donald Trump has come out and really poo-pooed the Iran deal so much that would be hard to imagine us pursuing with North Korea. That's what worries me, is that there's no place for North Korea to back into at the moment.
Well, Hugh, let me get your take on what Steve is saying, because you hear the president and other senior administration officials effectively saying, look, China has actually gone farther than they have in the past. They are withholding some coal imports, for example, and they say that, look, these talks are going in the right direction. Steve says that they're misjudging China. What do you make of that? Do you think the administration could be actually moving in the right direction in this regard?
I do. I compliment President Trump's approach, Secretary Mattis's approach, and General Dunford's approach, and Rex Tillerson's approach. China already has pushed North Korea a little bit, but there's a lot more that China can do. North Korea doesn't get an Iran deal. They already got an Iran deal in 1994, and that did not stop them. We rented non-proliferation from them, and they went off and cheated and built uranium proliferation facilities. And so, on the heels of reports today all over the Internet that in addition to the Vincent Strike Group, the Reagan and the Nimitz are being sent to the Korean Peninsula, and the stationing of all of our aircraft on high alert in Japan, on Guam, and even from some of the transcontinental airplanes that we can send from Missouri, I think North Korea really has to worry that if they try another nuclear test, this president will act with the dispatch that Bill Clinton refused to do in 1994.
Niall, let me get you to weigh in on the reaction that we saw over the weekend, which was a very restrained one from President Trump. He effectively said, I have nothing really to say about this. Do you think that's going to be effective in this regard? Do you think that's going to be enough to kind of get North Korea to back down, which they don't seem to be doing today, by the way?
Well, absolutely. And it's fascinating, Kristen, because as we all know, restraint is not something that President Trump is known for. That's not his usual modus operandi. So he's taking that kind of view. It was interesting to me, the restraint the White House also showed in this speculation that there could have been some sabotage involved in terms of the Korean missile launch. But more broadly, the interesting thing in the briefing that we both saw was this emphasis on unpredictability, on playing your cards close to your vest. The White House is placing enormous value or enormous importance on that, and we don't know how it's going to work out. There are people who support that approach. There are others who worry that if you don't draw red lines, you're actually introducing an element of uncertainty into international affairs that can be very dangerous.
I think it's a fantastic point, and I want to follow up on that by reading something, a headline that's coming out of Russia today, effectively saying that President Trump, for the very reasons that Niall is talking about, is more dangerous than Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea. Hugh, is it possible that being unpredictable, as Niall is laying out and describing, could ultimately be a liability for this president?
Of course it's possible, but I don't think it's. The statement out of Russia today, I think, should put to bed the idea that Putin and Trump have some kind of backroom alliance going on here. In fact, Russia has gotten very angry with President Trump over the last month, whereas President Xi has gotten close to him. Look, unpredictability cuts both ways, but what's not unpredictable is what 60 aircraft on the Carl Vinson, 40 of them strike fighters, can do, and 2 more carriers and ballistic missile submarines and B-2 bombers. North Korea has got to figure out this is a new sheriff, and to quote John Bolton, the era of American passivity, which dominated President Obama's 8 years in office, is over. I'm not saying that we're going to war with North Korea. I'm just saying that what they counted on, President Obama always rolling over, isn't going to happen this time.
Look, well, and let's listen to Vice President Mike Pence, a little bit more of what he had to say while he was traveling in South Korea.
All options are on the table. Just in the past 2 weeks, the world witnessed the strength and resolve of our new president in actions taken in Syria and Afghanistan. North Korea would do well not to test his resolve. The era of strategic patience is over.
Steve, what do you make of that stern warning to North Korea not to test the president's resolve? You talked about their bluster.
No, I think that it is consistent with Donald Trump's view that, you know, he's fed up with this extortionist nation. And I agree with the roster of things that Hugh Hewitt just laid out about capacity that we might bring to bear. What's not been discussed in this program is that about 250,000 South Koreans may perish as action is taken. If this were an easy fight solved by cruise missiles and military action, it would have been solved decades ago. What this interesting knot is that North Korea has held hostage Seoul, Korea, and everyone there, including Japan as well. And so it's partly, how do you untie that? And if you have a major conflagration on the North Korean peninsula, you have massive, massive human casualties. China has buffed up its presence on the North Korea border to try to repel refugees that might come through in this. And so all I'm saying is, look, there may be a collision. We may be on a collision course to something happening. But the notion that China would be so closely aligned with us that they're going to carry water in the way Donald Trump wants them to just makes no sense. The analysis is wrong. China is our largest overseas trading partner today. They're not getting anything from Donald Trump to take this, and cutting off coal in trade between China and North Korea is also not going to animate North Korea to move in a closer direction. We just need better analysis here. North Korea is a problem country. Throwing a lot of military on one side of it is something we've looked at trying to do before, but that is just part of the equation, and you've got a lot of other people whose human lives will be lost in South Korea, in Japan, if an action that is precipitously taken is not thought through well, and I don't think we're thinking it through well.
And Niall, final point to you: this administration seems to be resisting military action in North Korea. They seem to be looking at things like sanctions instead, or, as we've been talking about, China, which Steve is obviously making the point that's not going to work. But is that your assessment, that military action is sort of a last resort? Where do you see this going? I
think it is a last resort. I mean, clearly for the reasons that Steve has laid out, military action is very, very problematic. But I think it's interesting on this point, Kristen, the White House's rhetoric. On the one hand, it's we're not taking anything off the table. On the other, it's, well, maybe China won't buy so much North Korean coal. I mean, that seems a big spectrum or a big distance between those two positions. I think that's telling.
All right, well, we continue to watch.